how have you seen the politics of emergency medicine change over your career?
What was interesting about that time period was this was the early days of the beginning of the mega groups. And I had an interesting career because when I was a resident, I used to moonlight up and down the central coast of, or sorry, the Central Valley of California. And those were all these tiny little hospitals run by a couple of groups. And those groups were the type of group that kind of would just find a warm body and throw them in there. And that's what sort of was uh, the impetus for the Phoenix to write The Rape of Emergency Medicine. And I'm sure I crossed paths with him during that time period because I was in those hospitals. And when he wrote the book, yeah, I knew exactly what he was talking about. These contract groups were coming along and basically going to the hospitals and saying, listen, I know it's a problem for you to try and staff your department, so we'll just take over that responsibility and then we'll, provide the docs for you. And the hospitals just jumped at it. They were just like, yeah, that's great. Take this big headache off of our plate. And but then the groups were, finding anybody they could find. And so that was starting to happen during when I was in training. And then when I got out in practice, I joined a group that had a partnership track, and I was not, there was only 5 partners. And then, I worked there for 5 years, and then it was me and another guy, and we weren't going to be partners. And so we were starting to get kind of like, hey, what's the deal? And then that group sold to what was at that time MCare. And so this is a very interesting story. So I was working a night shift, and at that time MCare, I believe, was on the NASDAQ. And I was just looking at the NASDAQ had an online, this is very early days of, the web, and the NASDAQ was online, and so you could see the prospecti for the companies. So I went, hey, here's MCare's listed on the NASDAQ. Let's just see what they were all about, because I had no idea, who they were, what they were all about. I knew they were out of Texas at the time. So I go look, and sure enough, it tells me online what it's their prospectus, I guess, which lists their purchases and whatever. And there is the purchase of my group all listed there for the amount of money it was. And so I call up the other senior non-partner and I said, hey, the partners just sold us for, I forget the amount, but it was some staggering amount of money that they got. And and sure enough, we were, quote, sold. And that meant the whole group, all the docs. And the next thing we know is these guys from Texas show up and they're like, hey, it's going to be all great, peaches and cream, and we'll fly you to Texas. And so they did that. And then we had a big meeting. They took our significant others with us. And my wife, I remember, is another story because I put her on a bus and took her shopping to these really upscale, stores in Dallas. And my wife is not an upscale shopper. She hated every minute of it. And meanwhile, so they're giving us the whole, spiel about what MCare is all about. And she's sitting on this bus with all these women and significant others, shopping. So that was those days. And, there was a lot of, hey, we're going to do this better. And I was, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. And so I really was thinking, maybe it's going to be great. And it turned out not to be great.
Right.
They lost. So there was, I think, 4 contracts that were sold within 6 months or a short time period thereafter. They had lost 2. And then the performance at our contract started deteriorating significantly. They were, not able to recruit. They were cutting back. And the next thing I know, the hospital comes to me and says, hey, we want to boot this group out, but we want to keep you and your guys. What do you want to do? And I had been out in practice only 5 years. And so I really didn't have a tremendous amount of, background infrastructure knowledge on how to do emergency medicine. I was really pretty much uh, just a straightforward frontline clinical guy, but I'd had some administrative experience a little bit at that time, and I ran operations for the department. So I said, okay, let's just go find a better group because I can't do this myself,
Mm-hmm.
and that's
Mm-hmm.
what we did. And we joined CEP, which was at that time a giant partnership and had a great reputation. And so that's what we did. And I became the director, sort of under battlefield conditions. And
Interesting.
yeah. And then I was, given some assistance by the CEP, but this transition happened under tremendously difficult circumstances. Hospital had been bought by a for-profit group and a big hospital chain, and there was a lot of pressure on us to perform better. And once they rolled the contract over, they were immediately like, "Okay, what are you doing to do a better job?" And I was overwhelmed. I was completely overwhelmed. And so, so, but I think I told you this story. The hospital brought in a consultant physician who basically, just drove me absolutely crazy. Just every day was something new I was going to have to do, and I thought this guy's torturing me. Subsequently, we've become really good friends, or we became really good friends because everything he was doing was trying to fix the place quickly, and he had a great experience and knowledge on how to do things the way that if you had to rebuild a hospital from scratch and make it safe and efficient and really dot all the I's and cross all the T's, really have a JCO, uh, uh, everything using JCO standards and all that. So that's what he did. And he taught me that. And so over a short time period, or not so short, we really brought our department from a real chaos, and we went from being, really at the bottom of the heap amongst the HCA hospitals. That was the for-profit that bought us. We were number like 8 at some point. Yeah, and I got a lot of positive attention for that, and it's really was the launching pad for my career.